You check a map on your phone before you leave the house. You know exactly how far the coffee shop is. You know how long the drive will take, down to the minute. But somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a small group of humans walked into land no one had ever seen. No map, no compass, no idea what was on the other side, and they kept walking anyway. The real answer to how they did it is far stranger than they just wandered. Your ancestors did not stumble across the planet by accident. They read it. They moved with a kind of intelligence that modern life has almost erased from you. Every coastline was a clue. Every star was a signpost. Every animal track was a message. You still carry pieces of that intelligence in your body right now, and you rarely notice them. So how did a species with no boats, no engines, and no writing manage to reach nearly every corner of the Earth? Let's go back to the beginning. Around 70,000 years ago, a population of Homo sapiens in East Africa began to move. Not all at once, not in one grand exodus. In small, staggered waves, generation after generation, drifting outward like ripples in water. Geneticist Svante Pabo, who later won a Nobel Prize for his work on ancient DNA, helped prove something remarkable. Every non-African person alive today carries a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. That means your ancestors did not just pass through foreign lands. They met the people already living there. They mixed, they shared knowledge, and sometimes children. Think about that for a second. Before any road existed, before any nation had a name, humans were already forming connections across thousands of miles. But movement alone doesn't explain survival. The Sahara wasn't always a desert. Around 100,000 years ago, and again later, it went through wetter phases. Rivers cut through where sand dunes sit today. Lakes formed where there is now nothing but heat and stone. Archaeologist Alison Brooks has spent decades studying these shifting corridors, and her research suggests that early humans followed these temporary green pathways out of Africa like a trail of stepping stones. When the climate shifted again and the land dried out, the routes closed behind them like a door. They weren't just walking into the unknown, they were reading a landscape that kept changing the rules. Once outside Africa, the coastlines became the real highway. Not deep ocean crossings, shorelines, shallow bays. Places where fish, shellfish, and fresh water were reliable and close together. Marine archaeologist John Erlandson has argued for what's now called the coastal migration hypothesis, the idea that humans moved along the edges of continents far faster than they moved through inland forests and mountains. A coastline gives you food every single day. A dense forest might not. Why walk into the unknown interior of a continent when the coast practically feeds you as you go? This is where things get strange. Somewhere between 65,000 and 50,000 years ago, humans reached Australia. Not by land, Australia has never been connected to Asia by a land bridge. Even during the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, there was always open water to cross, sometimes dozens of kilometers of it, with no visible land on the other side. That means someone built a vessel. That means someone looked at open ocean, with no idea what was beyond it, and decided to get in a raft anyway. Try to imagine standing on that beach. You can't see land ahead of you. You have no way of knowing if there's anything out there at all, and still people pushed off from shore. Some of them almost certainly died doing it. But enough of them survived, and enough of them kept trying, that an entire continent ended up populated by their descendants. What does that tell you about the kind of species you come from? Meanwhile, in the far north, a different kind of frontier was opening. During the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked into glaciers that sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters. A strip of land emerged between Siberia and Alaska. Scientists call it Beringia. It wasn't just a narrow bridge. In places, it stretched over 1,000 kilometers wide, a land the size of a small country, covered in grasslands and roaming with mammoths, bison, and horses. People lived there, not just passed through. Genetic research led by scientists studying what's now called the Beringian standstill hypothesis suggests that a population of humans stayed on that land for thousands of years before ever setting foot in the Americas. They weren't migrating. They were living an entire chapter of human history on a piece of land that doesn't even exist anymore. It's underwater now, swallowed by the Bering Strait. An entire homeland erased by rising seas, and almost nobody alive today has ever heard of it. When the ice sheets finally began to retreat, a corridor opened between two massive glaciers covering what is now Canada. Some researchers believe the first Americans moved south through that gap. Others argue for a coastal route instead, hugging the Pacific shoreline in small boats, again following the same coastal logic that carried humans across Asia and into Australia. The debate is still active. New evidence keeps pushing the timeline earlier. Footprints found at White Sands in New Mexico have been dated to around 21,000 to 23,000 years ago, older than scientists once thought possible for humans in the Americas. Every time researchers think they've found the beginning of the story, an older layer shows up underneath it. None of this happened because ancient humans were reckless. It happened because your ancestors were exceptional pattern readers. They tracked the seasonal movement of herds. They noticed which stars stayed fixed through the night while others shifted. They learned which plants meant fresh water was nearby, and which meant a swamp to avoid. Every migration was really just applied observation, tested against life and death, generation after generation. That instinct never fully left you, it just changed shape. You still orient yourself by remembered landmarks, even in a city you've never technically mapped in your head. You still feel a pull toward water when you're tired or overwhelmed, an instinct that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with tens of thousands of years of coastlines meaning safety and food. You still glance at the horizon when you feel lost, even standing in a parking lot, even though there's no herd of mammoths to track and no unknown continent ahead of you. Your body still behaves like it's preparing for a journey it will never have to take. Every time you check a map before a trip, you are running a modern, shrunken version of the exact same process your ancestors ran with stars, coastlines, and rivers. The tools changed completely. Satellites replaced constellations, screens replaced shorelines, but the underlying behavior, the need to know what's ahead before you commit to moving, is identical. You are not more evolved than the people who crossed open ocean to reach Australia. You are running the same operating system, just with better hardware. So the next time you glance down at your phone to check how far away something is, remember what that instinct actually is. It's not modern convenience. It's an ancient survival tool still running quietly in the background of your life, inherited from people who once looked at an empty horizon, saw nothing but possibility, and walked toward it anyway.